To the next panel, we have another international partner, Dennis Doute, President of North American Society Nationale de, I won't try to pronounce the French, sir, I'll let you do that. And to share with us what France did and possibly even share some of his observations of how they handled these questions in France. Mr. Doute.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Kathleen Galgiani, supervisors, ladies and gentlemen. Having built almost 1,200 miles of high-speed line in a country which is just over the size of California, France has now 35 years of experience going through wine countries with some famous names like Loire-Vallée, Côte de Provence, Côte du Rhône, and more recently Champagne. And also through all kinds of agricultural lands, from cereals to orchards, almonds, and more recently even truffle oaks. As we have already heard, there are altogether two kinds of impacts on agriculture with the construction of a new high-speed line. First, temporary impacts related to the construction of the line, and then the permanent impacts linked with the operation and maintenance later on. I will briefly review those impacts and the associated mitigation measures being taken in the French context. First, temporary impacts include, and we have heard some of them but not all, earthworks, dust, and material transportation, millions of tons of material. Second, temporary impact, the access to parcels changes or interruption. Third type of impact, the drainage or irrigation modification or interruption. And the fourth, noise and vibrations. The mitigation measures for earthworks, dust, and material transportation, means and methods are adjusted to local context. Access dirt roads are watered. Filtering fences can be put in place. Reduction of transportation distances are an important factor regarding transportation things. For the access to parcels, and we have heard already some of that, of course, the new final access can be completed before construction starts, or temporary can well be temporary access can be made well adapted to the new situation. Regarding drainage and irrigation, deviation or creation of new drainage or irrigation systems, we have heard that. Temporary ones may be needed according to the construction phases. Regarding noise and vibrations, attenuation and fair compensation are the measures to be taken. Now, regarding permanent impacts, there are in fact two categories of those. Parcel reduction, so it includes the access problems, roads, and the turnaround area needed. The second big family is farming constraints. So farming constraints, smaller parcels, extended distance for farming machines, discontinuous access, irrigation, drainage, reduced productivity due to microclimate change can happen, wind or sun, water circulation, surface or underground water, new animals or plants. This may happen also. So these are the two big categories of permanent impacts. What are the mitigation measures? For the parcel reduction, optimization of parcels, this is possible and important. Limitation of parcels reduction, of course, acquisition, we have heard that, compensation. What is very important here in our experience, and this is the way it is done in France, is to negotiate a convention with the professional organizations up front, which is a basis for case-by-case negotiation. This provides a basis which is extremely important and, of course, respected and well regarded by both sides. Regarding farming constraints, mitigation measures include reorganization of parcels before construction so as to optimize the situation, to re-establish, of course, as much as possible, the continuity of access, of drainage, of irrigation so much, and a lot can be done. We heard about questions, can we put irrigation ducts under a net grade line? The answer in most cases is yes. Contradictory examination of each situation is necessary prior and after construction, because there are some cases where you don't know exactly where you are going. So if there is a doubt, then you have a study, you study the prior situation, and you follow during construction and even after. So as if there is a negative impact, this is compensated. And so what is important, of course, here is to have a long-term commitment to compensate, and not only just during the construction. For new animals and plants, it would be supervision, again, of the situation which would be done. So again, in summary, the most important point is to discuss a protocol with professional organizations with reference compensations, for instance, according to the age of the almond trees, if it's within the first 5 years, next 5, or later on the life of the tree, things like that. Our experience is it takes about 1.5 years to 2 years to finalize that. So it's a pretty long thing, at least in the French example. So some specific lessons learned with all this experience. There is indeed an impact during construction on poultry farms when they are right next to the line, but only during construction. There is no effect on cows and horses. I mean, the operation doesn't have any impact. I mean, I was not talking about what we heard about the dairies. Special crossings have been designed with the construction of high-speed new lines for frogs, for otters, for deers, etc., which you could not imagine, of course, beforehand, but this has been what we have done. Regarding the potential effect of remote vibrations on stored bottled wines, a blind test with professionals actually showed that the slightly preferred bottles were the remotely vibrated bottles, which was a little unexpected. That's the interest of having a blind test. Now, an idea which may or may not work, but a special fund can be established by the authority in order to acquire available land to potentially solve local problems. I mean, this is an idea that might be worth considering. And lastly, I would just mention that the experience shows that it takes the birds 2 months to get acquainted to the trains, meaning that the first 2 months you hit a lot of birds, but after 2 months they have learned. So in conclusion, a very, very important point in the way we deal with those issues is to designate someone for each specific area, one person, about 1.5 years or 2 years before construction starts, which will be the representative in front of all the local representatives, farmers and others. And this person, which is appointed very early on, has to stay during all the construction and even after, because as I mentioned, there may be commitment to fulfill after construction. This has proved to be extremely successful because people know that they can trust someone, they have someone to talk to from very early on, and if there are early commitments, he will have to live with them, I mean, during the whole process. So overall, the experience has been that less than 2% of the situations have led to litigation. All this, of course, has a cost, but this is to be taken into account in the construction project. It takes time and dedication, but I think it's really worth it. So thank you very much for your attention.
If I may follow up on one of your points and clarify that in your experience, you identified specific people for specific locations that were working with the property owners or ag groups within those regions from prior to the construction, the development stage, all the way through after the development and construction.
Correct. So you need to find someone who is local. And the number of people you put is depending very much upon the density of problems or owners or whatever. So you don't have a fixed number for that.
And you also mentioned long-term compensation. Could you expand on that, on the mechanics or what it is?
For instance, if I take some examples of what we heard, I don't know, if we take the example of the dairy, which may be no longer economically viable, but there's an uncertainty around that. So there may be an upfront agreement. I mean, if I transfer to the French situation, there would be an upfront agreement that there would be a try to make it viable, but if it's not viable after a few years, then the state, in fact, I mean, the owner, would then take over. I mean, in that case, buy the whole property, for instance. I mean, this is a kind of long-term commitment.
Thank you. That's intriguing, and learning from other folks is always helpful. Assemblywoman, are you back? No. Not yet. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. She's not back yet.
Okay, that's okay. Supervisor?
Thank you. Since you're one of the few people in this room besides our Japanese counterparts that have actually built one of these things, one of my constituents in the room has a question that I think might be very viable. Cole, could you come to the microphone and ask that for him?
Yes, sir. We've heard a lot of talk about routes. If you were looking at this valley from the start, and I assume you're familiar with the I-5, where there's no farming going in a lot of places because of lack of water.
I'm sorry, but I was told prior they are not allowed to comment on the California high-speed rail specifically.
Oh, so much for the transparency and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I apologize, but I agree. It would be a great question, but we were forewarned that they could not speak to
I'm well familiar with being treated that way, not a problem.
My apologies.
I apologize for throwing you to the wolves there.
Can you give a reason for that?
I was not given a reason for it. I believe it is probably because there are multiple partners that are vying for opportunities to work with the authority, and they're all prohibited from speaking specifically to the project. So, Mr. Doute, we thank you very much and appreciate your time.